How's it going, guys? I'm Brandon from Walker's Woodworks. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to show you how I made a personalized toy box. I started this project off like I do most of my stuff by making a 3D rendering in SketchUp. It's nice to have the renderings because they kind of set a plan in place, and you can also have something to send to your client as to what it might look like when it's done before you start the build. The toy box is made out of 3/4 inch plywood for a carcass and then 1x3 pine laid over that, stained different colors to kind of give it some depth. So here I'm just breaking down the plywood with my track saw, and then I'll take it over to the table saw and cut it to final width. I used pocket hole joinery to put the carcass together, so once I had my 4 sides and my bottom done, I could take it over there and start drilling all the holes. So I've been using this Armor Tool self-adjusting clamp upgrade to the Craig jig for a while now, and I can say that I really like it, so I'm going to leave a link to it in the description below, as well as all my other tools that I use in this video for you guys to check out. Once I get all the holes drilled, I could start assembling. I use these corner clamps to kind of hold everything in place and make sure it's all square before I clamp it down and put the screws in. I got the sides attached to the front, so then I just flipped the whole unit over to the back panel and attached it the same way. I wanted the bottom panel for the toy box to be lifted up off the floor a little bit, so I took some scraps of the T-track I had left over from building my assembly table, which are 3/4 of an inch, and clamped those in place. That way I'll have a stop and I know exactly where I need to place my bottom panel. Once I had everything where I wanted, I clamped it all down and screwed it all together. After the carcass was all assembled, I could move on to cutting the slats for the chevron pattern on the front. I cut them down to manageable size, but definitely over the size I needed. That way I can trim them up later to fit. I grabbed my square and struck a center line on the front panel. That way I'd have a reference line to line all the chevron pieces up to. All the cuts for the front will be 45-degree cuts, so I went ahead and set my miter saw up for that. Once I had them rough cut, I took them over and I marked out where it's going to line up on the box. And then I took it back over to the miter saw and cut just on the outside of that line, because I'm going to come back later with a flush trim bit and make it all nice and square. I clamped my square in place and the first board, that way I'd have stuff to kind of butt them up against too and make everything line up really easily. And I used the same process for the rest of the boards as I did the first one as far as trimming goes, and just kind of continued on. Once I had everything dry fitted, I took them back apart and used a Sharpie on the back to label where they went. That way they wouldn't get confused when I was putting it back together. Some of the boards I planned to use for the side panels had a little bit of bevel on the edge, so I just ran them through the joiner to square them up. Once the boards were all squared up, I could then start laying them out on the side. Making sure everything was nice and flush on 3 edges, then I marked that last piece and I'll rip that down to width so that way everything lines up. Once I had all the pieces cut for the front and the sides, I gave them all a quick sanding. I also pre-cut the trim for the top and the sides and the front as well. So this will be the trim that goes around the top. I wanted to put a little round over on there so it's not a sharp edge. And then I can move on to staining. Now on the carcass, I just stain the inside and the back panel because that's all you're going to see once everything's assembled. Since the boards I'm using on this are pine, I went ahead with some pre-stained wood conditioner. Applying it before you put stain on actually helps it from being blotchy and it ends up being a lot more uniform. It's basically the same process as staining, you just brush on a nice layer and then wipe off all the excess. After you wipe it all off, you just let it sit for about a half hour to an hour and then you can apply stain. Now I used 4 different stains on this build, hence the reason I'm pre-staining almost everything, because it would be really hard to do it afterwards. So I used a light, a medium, and a dark brown, as well as a red for the name. Doing it this way gave it some really cool contrast and made it really one of a kind. Then it was time to move on to the letters. These were cut on a CNC by my buddy Scott at Get Off the Couch Designs. I don't have a CNC or any way to easily cut out the letters, so I decided to outsource this to him. They came out really nice, and once I got them, all I really had to do was throw this little round over on there to clean them up. I'll link Scott's info in the description below. He has a really cool Instagram and builds some awesome stuff you guys should check out. I let everything cure overnight, and then I came back and I attached everything with glue and brad nails, making sure to reference all my markings and labels to ensure that everything was going back in the right place. Like I said, I'm going to run a flush trim bit around this, so I'm going to lay down some tape to protect the stain from getting any scratches or marks on it. Once I get to this point, I realized there was nothing to attach the other piece of trim to, so I just used a 2x2, clamped, glued, and brad nailed it into place. After the assembly was all done, I finished it with a few coats of spray lacquer. Hope you guys liked that toy box video. It's pretty cool to personalize something to the extent that I did on that one. If you did like the video, I have another one of my videos queued up for you up here that I think you'll like as well. And if you haven't subscribed, you can do that right here. I would really appreciate it if you did that. Also, leave me a comment below. Let me know how you like the video. Like, share, and hit that notification bell if you do subscribe to get notified when I drop new videos. I'll see you guys next time.